Welcome into this Telstra virtual event. I'm Justin Cleveland. And before we get started, just a couple of quick notes on the Telstra virtual events platform. There's a lot you can do here, including move around and resize the window boxes on your screen. And down along in the widgets along the bottom of your screen, you'll find a resources tab that has a copy of today's presentation, some white papers from Elastica, and a variety of other neat little items. So I do want to stress to you, this is an interactive talk. So feel free at any point to shoot us a question via the questions box. And we would love to hear from you during this conversation. So, on to the topic at hand for today. A couple of months ago, it's confession time. A couple of months ago, I got a note from my boss because IT had flagged my account. When I was transitioning to a new laptop, I didn't have an external hard drive with me. I just decided to upload the files from my computer to Box and then just download them again to the laptop. In my mind, it was an innocuous action that, unfortunately could have put my company at risk. The thing is, this sort of action happens often. It happens to businesses all around the globe. And in each case, a business is being put at risk. So how do you deal with that? Well, that's why I invited security experts Rehan Jalil from Elastica and Danny Ristevsky from Telstra to talk through the ways that you can keep your business secure without hampering the productivity of your workforce. So let's get into the conversation today, and I want to ask you on the call, how many unsanctioned applications do you estimate that are used in your organization? For example, if you have a corporate policy that says we only use Box, how many people out there do you think are using Dropbox or Google Drive or a variety of other methods? So those sorts of things. How many unsanctioned applications do you think you have in your business? 1 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 or more, or you're not quite sure? On this topic, I'm going to ask you, Danny Ristevsky, how many on average do you think unsanctioned applications are in a business?
Thanks, Justin. It's a good question. I mean, what most organisations will be probably surprised is if they do a investigation, they'll probably find more than what they're expecting. If you have a look at recent surveys or analysis along these lines, they typically range, and obviously it does make a difference on the size of the organisation, but they typically range between 15 to 20 apps, and that's not really including your personal applications or SaaS applications like Facebook or Twitter. So it's a fair bit, and it's quite common within organisations.
Well, we found that most that are on this call, in fact, over half, say they have 11 or more, which I don't think is a surprise because, as you mentioned, there are just so many different things that even I personally have on my phone that, is not moderated by my business.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a very common scenario that we see.
So let's jump into it. What are you seeing out in the marketplace, Danny?
Okay, great. So just to kind of set the scene, well, today we're going to talk about understanding the drivers for the rise in shadow IT within organisations, the many challenges that face IT departments dealing with the problem, and what organisations can do about it. But first of all, let's recap and have a look at some of the mega trends affecting industry. And there are 3 consistent themes that usually come up as having the most impact on enterprises today. However, impact in a positive way. So the first being mobility, which is largely driven by the consumerisation of IT and wireless mobile devices. The second mega trend is cloud, which has enabled the new delivery and business models that have been adopted by organisations. And largely, but probably the most important, is the explosion of applications, particularly around collaborative applications within the workspace environment. And a lot of industries and organisations are taking advantage of these trends and are really setting a real fast pace and driving organisations to be more innovative in an increasingly competitive environment. But at the same time, cloud delivery models and the popularity of mobile devices are somewhat responsible for the contribution to the rise of shadow IT within businesses. So why do I say that? Well, these mega trends essentially have contributed to the breakdown of the security perimeter model. In other words, the traditional security controls deployed within boundaries of an organisation no longer fit the new working model. And it's not until you actually put these trends together that you begin to appreciate some of the enormous challenges created by how applications are delivered, how they're being accessed, and how data is consumed by users. So in today's presentation, I'm going to really focus on how SaaS applications have contributed to the shadow IT problem.
So when you say shadow IT problem, would you classify it as a problem, or is it just something that exists that we have to deal with?
Look, I mean, and there's two sides of the argument. Certainly the IT department would actually see it as a problem, quite rightfully. And you're quite right. When we look at lines of business, they certainly see it as an opportunity and of being more productive. And we'll kind of talk, that kind of leads in quite nicely to this slide. So if we have a look at, the driving factors behind the acceleration and development of SaaS applications in the work environment, there are a number of key factors that make applications so attractive of this type. And it's probably what you would expect. So their popularity, just to name a few on this slide, includes better collaboration amongst colleagues and business partners, being more productive, improve usability, their cost effectiveness certainly comes into play, and being able to access them from almost any device. And no one would argue that today we kind of live in the apps-delivered world. And to give you a comparison, most of us are well aware of the BYOD phenomena amongst employees today who bring their mobile devices to the work environment. SaaS applications are no different. So if you like, you bring your own application in which employees have the flexibility to choose tools with which they get their work done is being adopted along the same lines. And if you look at kind of the detail and the analysis behind this, it actually makes sense because organisations are dealing with a whole new generation of users who have grown up on the internet, and it's no surprise that these users carry the same experiences and expectations from their own personal use of applications and bring those into the workforce. The other interesting reason, I suppose, why SaaS applications are so popular is the marketing model has also radically changed. So what I mean by that is rather than SaaS providers dealing with monolithic IT departments about deploying centralized applications, SaaS providers are now marketing and even selling direct to individual employees or business units within an organisation separately, and this is facilitated obviously through the adoption of SaaS applications. So, but, and there is a but, it's this proliferation and access to thousands of SaaS applications without generally centralised control or management can expose organisations to security risks.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. I mean, I used Google Drive for years. I was comfortable with it. When I come into business, I want to keep using the tool that I'm comfortable with. Unfortunately, that hampers, of course, productivity because not everybody is necessarily using the same app. But I mean, it also puts things at risk if I'm uploading customer data, those sorts of things. Because just a customer list, it may seem like nothing, but it can cause an issue.
Absolutely. And kind of to bring out, I mean, because everyone has this slight view on what shadow IT is, and really, I mean, to put it simply, it's the act of purchasing or using technology for the in the workplace or for the workplace, if you like, doing your own job, without the approval or knowledge of the traditional IT department. And this can be a range of services that include software and even hardware, like bringing your own PC or laptop. And as the illustration depicts an iceberg, it has the approved business application that sit above the waterline, in other words, the ones that the IT department can see and control, while the applications that sit below the waterline, which are consumed by employees, don't get the same visibility or control by the IT department. And what you'll find is, in most cases, and what we kind of saw on the survey is, you'll typically get quite a bit of applications that aren't visible today, that organisations that have not seen or have been given visibility to, and that causes some problems, like I said, depending on the part and the department within the organisation. So why is this a problem, if you like, or a challenge for organisations? Well, it poses two key fundamental challenges from an IT perspective. One from a financial and the other from a security. So for the financial, it does not allow the visibility and control of the corporate's IT spend, which potentially leads into inefficient spending, as companies don't leverage volume discounts as you would normally get with a key partner. But the other security aspect of it is, obviously the IT department is usually responsible for securing the enterprise and its data, and then not having the visibility or control can have varying implications, right from not being compliant to a regulatory standard, not meeting customer obligations, or even reputation damage, like you pointed out, with the loss of sensitive data. And the real kind of crunch of all of this, if you like, if you have a look at recent industry studies around the topic, there seems to be general industry consensus that shadow IT exists, but few organisations have a good understanding on the underlying detail.
Right. Well,
what I mean by that?
Yeah, any IT manager worth their salt understands that it is going on. But the extent of it,
exactly.
You can't really get your head wrapped around how big it is.
Absolutely, and that's the fundamental kind of findings of these reports. So they lack the detail of understanding how widespread is that within the organisation, or who are the perpetrators, or what are their motivations? Do employees even understand the risks, right? And that's kind of a key insight that is quite important to actually understand. And IT departments alike genuinely struggle with the question of how to protect the business while giving employees the freedom of choice. So if we have a look at some of the statistics around shadow IT, just to bring it to the forefront, these can kind of, we can start to appreciate the likely impact it may have on organisations. So take, for instance, there's a statistic there that claims 72% of people actually admit to using unsanctioned cloud applications.
Which is low. I feel like, 28% are lying. They're
You're probably right, actually. And quite a large portion of these applications, which is probably the more important kind of stat, have been identified to have some sort of risk if they're not used properly. And I, like you, Justin, am guilty of using unapproved applications more than I like to admit, and I'm sure some of our audience members are probably can relate to the kind of same.
Well, look, the issue we ran into when we were organizing this very event is that Danny and I are internal on Telstra, so we used Box to share these files back and forth. But when we wanted to share them out with Rehan, because obviously he is a contributor here as well, it became an issue. And so we needed to find a workaround.
Absolutely, yeah. And there is always challenges. I mean, there's no single bullet with this solution, but there is a framework, and this is what we're trying to draw out as part of the discussion here. And another kind of funny stat, if you like, the IT department are somewhat in the order of 6 times more likely to use non-approved SaaS applications. So they themselves are a big kind of offender of this. And the last kind of stat, which really brings it home and is really driving the trend, is we're seeing IT organisations actually spending in a decentralised way. So in this year, 2015, we expect 35% of organisations' IT expenditure will be managed outside of the department budget. And this is a direct result of line of business taking a greater role in determining and shaping well, what tools are best for my business unit to actually do the job that I'm being tasked with?
And I think that's a key one, because it gets into the issue that, it starts to change our mindset from what we're talking about in terms of risks. And yes, there are risks, but it's also people who are finding ways to do their job better and to be more productive. And so that the shadow IT is sort of spurring innovation, though not necessarily doing it through a way that might be the safest.
That's correct. And like we kind of talked about the mega trends, it's not really a choice that organisations can avoid, because they're being pushed by industry to innovate and actually take up some of these fantastic solutions. But you're absolutely right, they just need to do it in a more structured, controlled way. So what's the result of all of this? It's essentially, if you look at it more broadly, it creates a blind spot for organisations. Because if you have a look at SaaS applications and the data that they store, they sit entirely, as we mentioned previously, outside of the enterprise boundary and out of the control and visibility of the traditional IT department. And this somewhat compounds the security risk within an organisation. And you can see some of the security risks are associated with cloud applications. Not always the case, but certainly a key factor, especially when these applications may not be configured or used correctly. And that's not to say that cloud applications are any more or less of a security risk than traditional applications, but it's more, they certainly do need more attention on how they're being used and how the data resides within them. One important consequence of this is the decentralisation of applications and decision-making is now actually to a point where a single decision of a employee can affect an entire organisation. So it's not necessarily within the controls of the broader organisation. So just to give you an example, employee accidentally sharing sensitive customer data on a file sharing application without restricting access can expose the organisations to legal action under the Privacy Act. And this certainly does specifically apply to Australian companies that we've seen with some of the more tightened regulations around the Privacy Act earlier this year. And the new paradigm of SaaS adoption is creating, some might say, healthy tensions within the business. And there are two sides of the argument, and quite rightfully valid in their own right. One side of the argument, the lines of business, as we kind of discussed, argue that take-up of certain applications provides a quicker deployment to do their job, or a particular method, way that they can facilitate doing their job, better local decision making, and certainly access to the latest software and features, among other things. While the other side, the IT department, argue the support for a myriad of applications is largely untenable, and costs can certainly get out of hand. There are the obvious security risks associated with some applications, and they certainly don't want to be the corporate police, just to name a few, as being the core to kind of what their job role is. And like every large organisation, Telstra does have some healthy tension, even internally within our own organisation. Our CIO, Rez Yaconi, is very much a supportive kind of leader in our company of cloud adoption, and our CISO, Mike Burgess, needs to facilitate this in a safe but practical way. So there's a lot of discussion that happens between the heads of our kind of business, which is good, because it creates, again, a different way of thinking, a different way of viewing IT services that are delivered within the company. So to land on along those lines, it's just to draw on Telstra's own experience, and Telstra suffers, the same challenges with shadow IT, to no one's surprise, as many other large and small organisations. But as an example, Telstra realised we've got a growing need for a suitable file sharing application, and certainly email wasn't, it was getting beyond its capability in terms of sharing very large files. So we did an assessment of file sharing applications, SaaS-based, to take advantage of those delivery models. But we actually assessed those on what we call the 5 No principles in security that our own CISO actually promotes quite widely in our organisations. And the 5 No's are: know the value of your data, know who has access to it, where your data is, who is protecting it, and how well is it protected. And I suppose the key message here is, if we break down the problem of shadow IT, it's a data and people issue more than any application itself. And it's kind of important to actually understand that. So we did our evaluation. We certainly compared the security postures of different solutions, and we landed on picking Box as our corporate file sharing applications. And it's important to also note, as part of going through this process, the learnings that Telstra has, and it is quite important to share about empowering the business. And what we mean by that is we enabled the business to share files within the organisation and our business partners in a secure way that's consistent with our corporate policies. And this drives user behaviour in the right direction, rather than just opposing it or blocking applications that we're not necessarily approval of. And that's not to say that an application that might be suitable for one organisation doesn't necessarily make it suitable for another. Applications do need to align to a business policy and their objectives.
That actually brings up a good question point, and this is for you in the audience. Do you have a strategy or a process for applications to be approved for use in your business? No? Yes, but it's informal. Everybody just starts using the same thing. Or yes, we have a centralized app management strategy. Let me know how your business is situated. And I think that's an interesting point you brought up about Erez and Brian?
Mike,
having the conflict, because I know Erez well enough to know that he would just say, just do it. It'll work better. It'll be better. But you can't just throw something in. There needs to be a massaging process and getting people on board, because ultimately if you spend $500,000 on a solution and that solution is not adopted by your people, then you've wasted $500,000. Which I don't feel like is a good use of $500,000, just personally. But that's sort of an idea. So I did have a question come in from the audience that I want to ask, and perhaps this is a good point to bring Rehan into the conversation. What about data sovereignty? So what about this data?
Yeah, I think this is certainly an important topic, especially when these cloud applications are getting hosted in various different geographies. It is important for the organizations to understand where the data is going to go and what are the policies that are around it. And certain organizations have low tolerance, for having data going out to different geographies, especially in Europe and certainly for some organizations in Australia. So it is an important aspect to understand how that cloud application actually deals with the data.
Yeah, so you don't really know when you're uploading something to a data sharing service exactly where it's going. You just assume that it's secure, and frankly, the way I look at it as a non-tech person, it's secure, it's safe, it's in the cloud, it's fine. And I don't think about the geographical issue, which is a very, very important question. So coming back to our poll question, it looks like we're pretty evenly split across our audience as far as a strategy for putting something in place, which I find very interesting, but I think makes sense, because the way that we used to do things, the IT manager and the head of the business just made a decision, and then it trickled down. Today, people bring in their own tools. So it's a very interesting point. So let's bring Elastica and your work into this conversation, Rehan, and talk about the enterprise shadow IT.
Absolutely. First of all, I certainly want to thank Danny for explaining very nicely the strong underlying drivers of cloud app adoption, which, of course, much of it is happening organically by the employees of the company. Now, cloud app certainly is a game changer for the enterprise and the IT itself, and certainly it provides the opportunity for the IT to become a key enabler in actually taming the shadow IT, so it can be adopted more responsibly. It is happening currently without much of oversight, but what are the different methods in which you can use where this can be adopted in a much more responsible and a much more orchestrated way? That's something that we can talk about. The best way is to actually understand this from the context of perhaps a recent incident and what kind of implications that incident created, and what would an IT person in that situation, in the hindsight, should have done, should have known, and how that could have been prevented. So this is a story that recently came out. This is a story of an employee of Morgan Stanley, young guy, 30 years old. He had worked at the firm for over 5 years, so a veteran in the firm in some ways. One fine day, he decided that he's going to steal about 350,000 contacts of some wealthy individuals, and just using file sharing service and post it on something called Pastebin. And he tried to sell it, in lieu of something like speed coins, which is equivalent to Bitcoins. Now, this story of this employee or Morgan Stanley or file sharing is not just an isolated incident. This can happen in any company while shadow IT is going on by any user of the company. So what can a CIO or an IT professional methodically do to such that the cloud apps, which have their own strong merits of being adopted, they are not completely shut down, but at the same time, what are the different practices and what are the different kind of information they should have to make very methodical decisions to adopt these cloud apps. Now, the way this journey starts is something that you if you want to do is an audit of the shadow IT itself. And the shadow IT audit, should give you a very clear picture on the risks that are inherent in these cloud apps. And of course, risk is a very subjective term, so it should also give you the risk as perceived by your organization in your industry, which may be very unique, from the lens of a particular company. So what are those things that an organization need to know to start this journey of methodically adopting cloud applications and leveraging shadow IT to their benefit? The first thing, of course, is visibility and discovery process. In this, of course, the IT organization, they need to know that which applications are widely getting used inside the company, and what are the different inherent risks in these applications that are there. Now, as I mentioned earlier, that the risk is a subjective term, so this audit should be able to fine-tune the risk rating of an application to the risk tolerance of the organization. This should be more like a matching service to say, considering your organization in this particular segment, these are the kind of applications that are below par, or these are the applications which are above par, to match with the risk tolerance of the organization. And also, there are different dimensions of risk. So the risk could be tied to how an application handles data, whether it does, what level of encryption does it do, what level of encryption does it do at transit and at rest, where does the data go, so how does it handle data is one category. The other category of risk would be the access controls, whether the application has inherent capabilities to do the right levels of access control, like two-factor authentication or SAML and other things.
Hey, Renan, this may be a bit of a remedial question, but how do I even start figuring out what's being used on my network?
Yeah, so I think there is a lot of information often these IT organizations have because they have firewalls, they have proxies, and often they may even have agents on different devices to collect enough information to do an assessment on top of it. And so instead of actually doing a very large exercise, all it requires is to just understand from these same logs that what are the different applications that are getting used. But from there on, the audit should be doing is to give clear visibility on the risk rating of these applications. So the journey starts from the data that actually IT organizations already have. So they do not need to actually do anything more than just making use of the logs that may already exist within their proxies, firewalls, or agents.
Easy enough. All right, on to the next.
Yeah, so going back to the third level of course, risk is the inherent administrative capabilities in these applications. Some applications do not have much capability for an IT organizations to do oversight at an organization level within the application. So it's a multiple dimensions of risk that they need to understand before they can say that whether this matches with my risk tolerance or not. Another important thing is the compliances. The cloud applications, they need to, some organizations require them to be compliant to SOC 2 or ISO standards, and that visibility is extremely important to make any decisions and judgment calls. Similarly, it's often seen that within one category, there could be many applications getting used. So they need to understand that applications are getting used in which category, whether it is a file sharing, whether it's accounting software, whether it is human resource management, whether it is CRM, whatever the different categories be. This answers, if they're made readily available to the IT organization as part of this audit, makes life a little bit easier. Also, when it's not very uncommon to see that the customer often can discover tens of applications in the same category getting used. So it could be that there are 10 different file sharing applications heavily getting used within the organizations, or there could be 3 different kind of CRM tools that may be getting used. Even for as simple thing as conferencing, there may be like 5 different conferencing applications getting used inside the organization. So that requires this audit to also facilitate the IT organizations to make very quick risk assessment comparisons, pretty much like when you'd go and do a car comparison shopping. Then you put these side by side, these different applications, and do a quick assessment to see these equivalent functionality applications which are better in which dimensions of risk, such that for two good reasons, to make recommendations based on the matching with respect to risk tolerance, and also this becomes a very interesting consolidation opportunity where instead of having like 5 licenses for file sharing applications of different kinds, you can start kind of having people migrate to a much more methodically chosen, highly used, as well as a very safe, cloud application.
Right, so you can point them to the one that people are already using, and in that case, you already know what people have used in the past, so that makes it easier to create instructions for migrating to the new platform by saying, listen, you've always used Google Drive, here's how it compares to Box, here's what's different, and here's what you need to know. And that makes that transition and that people management, which is what Danny was talking about, this is really a people issue, just much easier.
Yeah, it's to your earlier point, you mentioned that you can spend $500,000, $1 million on a tool based on your own perception that this is probably the best tool. But, in this world of very open environments, it's best to learn, instead of doing a survey, just learn directly from your logs and discovery and audit process that which are the applications which are most popular and overlap them with which are most secure, and hence you have a higher chance of success of adoption of those applications and employee, content and an employee being happy in that choice also. So that comparison could be very, very handy. And these are sometimes this data is not easy to actually get if somebody would want to do this and gather the data on their own versus actually having these analytics and all these things being made available on a whim, literally. Now, once an IT organization they have already done their comparisons. Maybe it seems like you have a question here. Maybe I should pause.
Yeah, so before we jump into this, the comparison results, so let's ask the audience basically the question I asked a minute ago. Do you have the tools in place to monitor and track shadow IT? No, and you don't plan on implementing them. Just go by, maybe you ask around the office to find out what people use. No, but you are planning on implementing them in the next year or so. Yes, you already have them in place and they're managed internally, or they're already in place and they're managed by a vendor partner, say like Elastica. Just picking a company out of thin air. But let us know what kind of management you have to be able to find out these risks, because I think that's really a key here is to know what's going on within your organization, and particularly on the smaller side of the business. We may not necessarily have a dedicated person to just keep an eye on that network. They may have 3 or 4 other jobs, and they may slip through. So it's something to at least keep an eye toward. So we wait for those results to tabulate. Go ahead, Rehan, and start jumping into what to do post-assessment.
Absolutely. So let's say, here's the results. Do you want to go over the results?
Yes, no, that's perfect. But not planning on implementing that. And I think that's part of that SMB, the smaller side, and already in place and managed internally. That's an interesting result to me. So keep those in mind as we go forward. But go ahead, Rehan.
Yeah, so once you actually have done these comparisons, then IT teams can methodically tag the cloud apps which they consider as sanctioned, which they think they're going to start helping to adopt, pay for it, and promote wider use of it in the organization. And of course, the ones that are deemed to be risky and do not match the risk tolerance criteria of the organization, they can tag them as being unsanctioned applications. And this process is not one time. This has to be done kind of automatically on an ongoing basis, because SaaS applications are coming on their own from around the world, and adoption is happening so much organically. This has to be an automated process. So once these applications are adopted, there's a misconception often which says that the responsibility of an IT organization kind of stops here. Now they have chosen a safe application, and it's a sanctioned application. Employees can use it, and often it may be a misconception to say responsibility kind of stops there. In fact, that's where a journey starts to say how in an application which is sitting in a third-party data center, it could be in the right geography, but still a third-party data center, in which my employees are going to go using any device and use it, how would I actually monitor to understand if any exploitation of user accounts is happening? How would I actually understand if a data leakage is happening with or without the consent of the employee who's using that application? And how would I investigate? All of those things actually starts with a very new journey of a cloud app security. The closest example I'll give you, when we started using, many years back, organizations started using widely email, became very obvious that even a single application like an email because it has inherent information exchange capabilities, it requires a very specialized security to monitor which kind of data is going, which kind of malware is coming in through and getting, what kind of phishing attacks are coming through email, what kind of spam is coming through email. That became a very specialized security for one simple application like an email system. Fast forward now, almost every cloud application actually has more information exchange capabilities than an email because you do not have to attach anything. And it requires a very sophisticated new life cycle of security to monitor and manage and control the data inside these cloud applications. So the best way to explain would be an example which recently again happened. Last year, Salesforce admins within an organization, they got innocent-looking email from Salesforce that literally got them perhaps off their seats, telling them that their employees who are using Salesforce, they may be under attack from a purpose-built malware called Dire, and the purpose of that malware is to hijack the session and, of course, steal information from Salesforce. Now this information all of a sudden creates a completely new perspective on the security of cloud applications. If you were the admin who got an email, the first question that comes is, like, were any of my users targeted for this? And if they were they actually breached? And if they actually breached, like, what kind of data was lost? And how do I find it? How do I tell at this point? Because you just told me that this is getting targeted, but how do I tell? I have no visibility in some ways. Data is sitting in your data centers and employees access it from computer. I just don't even know. And then, of course, the next logical question comes is that, like, could I have detected it? I mean, if Salesforce did not send me this email, was there any way for me to detect it that any of my user accounts was under attack? If I did detect it somehow, was there any automated way to protect against it, automatically kind of shut down those accounts or not have data go out if any abnormal activity was happening? And if I was asked this question as a responsible security admin or a Salesforce admin to tell that how much data has gone away, would there be any way for me to go do an incident response or investigation? And that event kind of highlights a completely new life cycle of security that is needed once you have even adopted a sanctioned cloud application where all the enterprise data is going to be sitting, and new kind of security is going to be needed for these very specialized applications. Now here, the way that I would explain the complexity of this problem is simply take the number of employees that your company has and take the number of applications that those employees will be using in the cloud apps and multiply them. If there are 1,000 employees, multiply by 10 apps, you already have 10,000 user accounts. And it is all about understanding the usage on these user accounts. You have to now monitor the usage on 10,000 user accounts and any sharing activity, download, upload, inbound activity. And if it was reliant upon a traditional method of alerts on any small incident here and there, it's just not very humanly possible or not probably feasible, economically feasible to handle this thing in a traditional methods. So here, detection methods have to be very different, and they have to be very super easy to kind of pinpoint the user accounts that are perhaps being exploited by a malicious hacker, by a malware targeting these applications, or an insider that has been compromised, or an insider that is just leaving the company, or is just acting maliciously. So there needs to be a technology that kind of pinpoints and makes it very super easy to straight away take to the person who seems like is acting maliciously. And from there on, the journey starts to investigate. If you want to figure out whether it's a real threat, you should be able to just drill down to the exact activity that seems suspicious, and further drill down to know exactly what are the set of events that caused this particular user to be pinpointed as being being malicious. And of course, if there are 10,000 user accounts in the example I gave, there is just no manual way to keep investigating and keep remediating these issues. So it has to be some policy that you should be able to define, where once you set the policy, you can forget about it. You can rely upon the machines to do their magic of correlating these events, doing the data science, finding the incidents, and automatically shutting down surgically those transactions which look very, very dangerous.
So this is the question then. I mean, it seems like something that's obvious that we've been doing for years, which is blocking malicious movements and things that seem suspect. So how is this different from existing approaches when you're looking at things in terms of cloud? And what has to change in terms of technology and in terms of mindset?
Yeah, so here the key thing is in a traditional security, you have full control of the machine, the network, you have your perimeter. So here, the traditional method of putting some perimeter doesn't apply. Here you have to somehow find or infer the exact transaction that may be going on your cloud, on your assets sitting in that cloud application, either by inspection of traffic or by hooking into these cloud applications or by inferring from logs, and then building the threat model from it. Also, enforcement may be very different. It may be that data leak your traditional firewall may never see, because two applications in the cloud may be talking to each other back end of the servers, and the data may go from one cloud app to the other cloud app. So you may have to kind of hook into the back end of these services to infer that kind of a issue, and then maybe if the APIs exist, you may want to remediate it through the APIs rather than actually taking actions in line.
Right. So then how do you So how do you then balance that out between for a small business that may have limited resources but also have limited staff, and how do you balance that against a large organization, which then as you mentioned before, you see almost an exponential growth in the amount of potential problems. How do you balance that out for different sized businesses?
Yeah, I think this is a kind of a new era of machine learning and data science, in which machines have to do the job of correlating the events and simplifying it. As you can see perhaps in this visual, this can simply highlight in a very simple way to say which user you should go after. Instead of throwing 10,000 alerts, it can actually simply pinpoint to the user and then have even a small organization to visually very easily see which user account they should be worried about. In a traditional systems, it was all about throwing alerts and logs, and it was very hard especially for small organizations, to throw manpower to infer real threats or finding the needle in the haystack from those logs. This has to be done using machine learning and data science, and that's next evolution happening. It's only possible because this kind of cloud security is leveraging cloud scale systems and big data technologies to simplify.
And it's really important to mention we really want to support too people who are trying to find productive ways to do their job, and those who are not acting maliciously, but still maybe putting the company in some sort of risk or an actionable position. How do we support them and balance all this? It's a long conversation that I think we have to have. That's not going to get resolved here, unfortunately.
Yeah. The other thing is the traditional DLP systems, the classic DLP systems, they were all about doing regular expression matches on attachments on email or FTP, especially on the network side. But reality is now most applications that offer cloud file sharing services, you do not have to attach anything. You simply go to that application, you instruct that application to share a folder, and magically that information gets shared. No upload of information happened. And the traditional DLP systems completely fail to actually even understand what just happened, because the real data is still in the cloud. From that cloud, simply giving access to some third party who can go directly to the cloud applications without ever touching your perimeter. So the classification of data and the classification of links that are flying around, which could represent a huge amount of folder, that is a completely new area which small and large organizations need to understand that it is not a traditional DLP system that can even classify to tell which kind of data just leaked. And that again, other thing especially for small to medium enterprises, that even to define those regular expressions, and it was kind of very complex. So now new techniques like natural language processing and semantic analysis, they should do the job on behalf of the team to automatically classify the documents to tell if it's a text document or a legal document or design document or a malware that just either went out or just came in. And that is extremely important in this context also. In essence, I will summarize in a way that this journey of adopting cloud applications by leveraging shadow IT certainly starts with auditing the environment, simply using your logs that certainly already exist in somewhere in the firewalls and proxies, evaluating, using the right tools to evaluate and compare and understand the risks, and then fine-tuning the firewalls to classify sanctioned versus unsanctioned applications. And from there, new journey starts off on sanctioned applications, finding if there are any exploitation going on, being able to define new kind of policies, finding if there is data is leaking, and then protecting against a malicious or naive data loss that may be going on these applications. So with that, I'm going to perhaps pass it back to Denny to summarize that.
That's great. We have just a couple of minutes left, and we'll have another poll question coming up in just a minute, but we'll have some time for questions as well, so if you want to submit those, please do so via the Q&A box. Denny, wrap us up.
Great. So in summary, what are the key takeouts? So I suppose the first question is, the first kind of key takeout is looking at new ways of delivering IT services, and this does require a somewhat new mindset, and it's basically a way of the IT department facilitating the lines of business, doing their job a lot better, but at the same time getting a compromise and empowering the business. There's obviously the requirement to have new tool sets to protect and control the challenges that SaaS applications bring, and starting with understanding your environment, particularly the audit part, or you audit your usage of SaaS applications is probably the first step. We tend to kind of always think about some of these as technical problems to solve or technical challenges that we need to address, but one of the most important observations to take into consideration is having a well-defined corporate policy and a high level of awareness among employees of what they can or can't do, and that's really addressing the people issue. So in summary, I suppose in one aspect, shadow IT does bring inherent challenges, but it's a great business enabler if you get the right framework and model in place to actually facilitate the adoption of some of these innovative services.
Yeah. So I think the one thing that is important for us all, sorry, Dan, were you wrapped on that slide?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, good. The one thing that's important to remember is that this is a conversation. I mean, there's no solution, and that hurts to say that there's no one magic bullet that's going to take care of everything. But really, have a conversation with us, with Elastica, with your peers, with your colleagues, and find out what's going on, what's working, what's not working, and what you can do better. You can download copies of white papers down in the resources tab, a lot of other information in there, and we do encourage you just to have the conversation, whether it be with us or with anyone else. So with that, I'm going to ask one last poll question to the audience and ask a question to those of you here in the room. First of all, what is the main challenge when it comes to implementing a strategy to address shadow IT in your organization? Not enough internal resources, a lack of in-house skill, you don't have the budget to do it, or your management doesn't see it as a problem and doesn't support chasing it up. So let us know what your thoughts are there. And Rehan, I have a couple of questions for you quickly, as we're running low on time. But so you were talking about the assessment. Now, does that take into account things like a web-based application? So you're not using the installed Dropbox, you're just going to the Dropbox website and uploading things that way. does it take into account those sorts of variances, or is it installed apps only?
It's actually both. So even if the application is adopted through the web interface or through installed applications, both need to be monitored. Because especially for file sharing applications, a lot of these would be installed on the end users. So both certainly need to be monitored. For the risk assessment part, because generally the traffic is going through the firewalls and proxies anyways, so you get the logs and you can find the extent of the usage of these applications. And even when we start monitoring traffic, you probably have to see both traffic. Now, these applications also provide API access from the back end of these services, so it does not matter whether the application got used through the web interface or got used from the desktop client. The activities would be monitored, data would be classified, and policies would be enforced using APIs also.
So with just a minute left here, I know going to be a tough question, but ultimately we're facing a global problem because apps are being built everywhere and they're flying around. Now, you're in the U.S. You've just come to Australia recently. Are you seeing any Australian-specific challenges, things that we have to watch out for, or is it really reflective of the global marketplace?
That's a great question. Being engaged with some of the largest firms in U.S. and Australian major regions actually taught us one very interesting things. Just like Facebook and Twitter and all these are getting adopted by the consumers, it's interesting to see that across the globe, the Office 365 in particular, Salesforce, Dropbox, Box, it's a global phenomenon, very much aligned with just the way people are adopting the Facebooks of the world. Also, when in Australia, I was there, many large companies are actually adopting these SaaS applications. In fact, some companies had dozens of SaaS applications which they knew that they were getting used, and they're planning to actually do the risk assessment and then go through the cycle of weeding them out and then consolidating and then adopting this new life cycle of security. Last thing I would say is that because this is absolutely a global phenomenon of adoption of cloud apps, it is propelling huge momentum behind this new kind of cloud access security, and Gartner accordingly is kind of rating this as one of the fastest growing areas even within the security segment.
Well, it's a little bit scary and a little bit overwhelming, but it makes perfect sense. So that is all the time we have for today's event. I want to thank my presenters, Arihan Jalil from Elastica and Danny Ristevsky from Telstra. You want to learn more about them? Click on the Speaker Bios tab down there at the bottom of your screen. Additionally, in just a moment now, you're going to see a survey pop up. Let us know what you thought of the event today, what you thought of the content, what we could do better. And if you'd like to get in contact with us, feel free to leave your name and contact information in there, and we will get back to you as well. So that is going to do it for this edition of Telstra Virtual Events. Thank you all very much for taking some time and joining us here today. Again, thank you to my guests, and I look forward to speaking with you again soon.